Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about one of the fundamental errors in cognitive behavioral therapy and what it looks like specifically, and how you really just can't get therapy from a cognitive behavioral therapist. I mean, it can be helpful to talk with a cognitive behavioral therapist, but by its nature, I'm going to argue it's just not therapy. And if it's helpful for you, again, that's great. Then go get help. But if it's not, then maybe the answer isn't another gratitude list or some technique or some strategy guide. Speaking of strategies, I recently read a book, Gatekeeper by Dr. Sean T. Smith. The subtitle is A Tactical Guide to Commitment. So there's overlap here, I think. Psychology, women and dating, something I touch on. And in the book, he teaches you how to be a gatekeeper, right, so to speak, how to guard yourself from women, from immature women who waste your time, just any kind of unhealthy relationship. And I think it's a good philosophical work in lay terms that describes the importance of virtue from the perspective of women in dating, which is exactly what Aristotle does, by the way, Nicomachean in Ethics, is he asks, how do you be a good person? Well, one of the ways he explores that is, well, how do you be a good friend? And this is what Dr. Smith is doing in this book. He's exploring how to be a good man through the perspective of, well, how do you be a good boyfriend or a good husband? So I think that's legitimate from that perspective, but I'm going to make the point. This is, right, I'm talking about Aristotle. This is philosophy. This is not psychology. It's not therapy. It's close to therapy. Close, but way off, as the saying goes. And nothing personal. I think Dr. Smith, he's probably a good guy, and he seems probably have a lot in common, but it's not therapy, what he talks about in this book. It's not psychology. Right, so when you go to a cognitive behavioral therapist, which I see a lot, and people just get frustrated and more annoyed after the process, after their 12 sessions, whatever, well, guess what? It wasn't therapy. So if it doesn't work, keep looking. Okay, so let's go to the outline here, and we're going to go over a case study over about one Alonzo, who was brought up in the book, Gatekeeper. So I'm going to go through that just to make this as palpable as I can. Then we'll go through Dr. Smith's analysis of Alonzo's scenario. Then we'll go to my analysis, what CBT doesn't see. Okay, let's go to Alonzo. His backstory is he comes from a chaotic home, emotionally furious mom, I guess you could say, withdrawn father. His father would work all the time and retreat to the bar and work. I don't think his father had a drinking problem. Maybe he did. But he would retreat to talking with his friends and complaining about his wife and how terrible she was. So Alonzo didn't do very well in school growing up. He became a general contractor, it sounds like, did well for himself. But there was a lot of conflict in his home, and he survived by avoiding conflict. I think that's the main point. Dr. Smith says Alonzo often had to fend for himself because his parents were preoccupied with their own disintegration. That's something good to note. So let's see how this case study goes. Then Alonzo met Maura, who wasn't his first girlfriend, but she captivated him like no other. He saw a spark in her personality. She brought the excitement Alonzo felt was missing from his disciplined world. He was bored with his life of structure and self-control. Maura made him feel alive, and the sex was great. Of course, they were infatuated, but the infatuation always fades. So you see how Dr. Smith poses the problem. There's structure, self-control, discipline on one side. That's boring. And then there's more on the other side. She's exciting. And this indicates, of course, the philosophical error of the mind-body dichotomy, which, hey, I typically wouldn't bring up boring. I usually save the boring stuff for the end. Don't worry, I'm going to bring up the mind-body dichotomy at the end as well. But I'm going to just introduce it here to let you know what I'm thinking and let you know what Dr. Smith misses and it's not Dr. Smith, it's just CBT. I'm just using him as a lens to view CBT. I wouldn't mention this so soon, except what I appreciate about this book and what Dr. Smith does is there's a section towards the beginning before he gets into his principles and his case studies and everything. And the section is entitled, "A Mind is Divided Against Itself." Dr. Smith thinks that conflicts are metaphysical. In truth, they're part of the neurosis. And he gives this example of a guy at a bar. You're at a bar, you've had 2 beers and you want a third one, but you just turned 42 and a third beer will make you a little bit groggy in the morning and you have work to do, you have a family to take care of. And he poses emotion, dealing with emotion as in this scenario. Your higher logical self, the proverbial angel on your shoulder, wants you to go home and go to bed, get a good 7.5 hours of sleep so you can wake up and provide for your family. The lower, the proverbial devil on your shoulder wants you to stay at the bar and have a third beer and maybe, risk being a little groggy in the morning. And this is how he thinks of emotional conflicts. And he explicitly says rationality runs contrary to emotion. Emotional mind is not the enemy, he says. It only requires supervision. The implication is the emotional mind is lower, what he calls the emotional mind, your limbic system. It's lower. It requires training because it's lower. Right? And he thinks this, well, we'll get into why he thinks this, but he thinks this because he doesn't understand how emotions work, right? That's where we're going with this. And he even says there's a space in your brain for both emotions and rationality, but of course, never the twain shall meet. You need to hold your logic on one hand and say, yes, this is the right thing to do. This is my higher self. Then on the other hand or shoulder, right, you go, oh, this is the wrong thing to do. And you need to look at that decision. Make it stark like that, and that's going to make it, I guess, more likely for you to make a good decision, to clarify. And yes, that can definitely help. I'm not saying that's not helpful, but technically that's a stoic approach to your mind. That is not therapy, because never the twain shall meet. So this is his worldview, right? So you get to an emotion that's lower, you get to an emotion that seems to drag you down, and there's the conflict. Therein lies the conflict, and he accepts this as a foregone conclusion. All right, well, let's continue with the case study. So it ended up, so they were infatuated, but infatuation always fades. And then in their case, the infatuation faded quickly. It was about 6 months into the relationship when Alonzo noticed Maura was often angry with him. With increasing frequency, he had to calm her because she had taken outsized offense at trivial incidents. For example, he once ate a lunch late when they were planning an early dinner, and for several days Maura felt as if Alonzo had betrayed her. So what are we looking at here? That's right. Archetypally, we're looking at a schizoid BPD relationship. I'm not saying that Maura's BPD. I'm not saying Alonzo's schizoid, but boy, it sure is on that spectrum, isn't it? Right? And it's good to look at these things as their archetypal, their models of what it really is to understand the nature of what's going on. Right? She gets upset at him to get him emotionally involved in the relationship because he's tuned out. I wonder, it says here it took 6 months before he realized that Maura was often angry with him. I wonder, and I don't have to wonder that hard, how often on their first date, Alonzo went out of his way, maybe not totally out of his way, but just in subtle ways tried to manage Maura and make her happy. Not from the place of like, oh, I'm going to lie to her or anything like that, but oh boy, I hope she likes me. I hope she likes me. Why? Because my life sucks. Because my life is boring. Because it's just about this discipline, and there's probably a lot of issues there that you don't even go into. Right? It was probably happening from the beginning. And so they needed each other, right? He needs her emotions and she needs him to calm her down. It's a symbiotic, unhealthy, but symbiotic relationship. All right, let's continue with the case study. Alonzo was quick to point out that it wasn't all bad. He enjoyed her company, but he always knew the next crisis was imminent. Being a dutiful man, he's dutiful now? Okay, we'll see about that. Being a dutiful man, he felt as if it was his responsibility to help her manage her emotions. That meant, in part, walking on eggshells to avoid upsetting her. He learned to avoid discussing his challenges at work because she frequently responded by accusing him of sullying the mood. I like how he's a dutiful man now because he's managing her emotions. Is that what a dutiful man does? That's his traumatic response, right? He's afraid. He's afraid of other people being upset at him, and his response, his traumatic response, his living out of his childhood is to calm down people around him. That's not him being dutiful. That's him being immature. That's him being, I would argue, manipulative. And we need to look at that before he can clear up any other issues in the relationship. You got to look at what you're doing first. Yeah. And look, when he says she frequently responded by accusing him of selling the mood when he brought up his challenges at work, what's probably going on here, clearly, Alonzo is a guy, capable though he may be, doesn't know how to manage his emotions. So when he talks about challenges at work, right, I can make the inference that he complains. He complains to Maura. And you know what? She's right to not want him to complain. I think what Alonzo's doing here, most likely, is the codependent shuffle. It's when you say, okay, I'm going to take care of your emotions. Look, you, Maura, when you get angry, I'm going to calm you down to make sure you're okay. Now, when I come to you to complain, I implicitly expect you to do the same thing. I take care of you, so you take care of me. But just because he takes care of her doesn't mean that she needs to take care of him. And you see what their focus has been so far? It's been on her and what she's doing, when there's clearly a lot of things going on with him and what he's doing. And I'm not saying she doesn't play her part. Of course, I'm sure the analysis of Maura here is correct. But this is how the red pill CBT comparison works, because it's all about tactics and here's what you do and let's analyze this situation. Yeah, get tactical about a situation. First, you need to get tactical about yourself. You got to go into yourself and see where your issues are coming up in this relationship. Probably he's talking about work. He's really complaining. Okay. So the relationship continues down this downward spiral. And yeah, that was the downward spiral of Alonzo manages Maura's emotions. She becomes more dependent on him the more that he manages her emotions. So now he needs to manage her emotions more and more. And the final words in Alonzo case study is Alonzo stayed in the relationship because, as he says, that's what men do. Right? That's what men do, is they just manage their women like this, and they're martyrs, right? They're martyrs to their girlfriends, their wife's emotions. So let's go to Dr. Smith's analysis here. I think he's missing something. I'm going to try to hint at what he's missing so you can think along with me, and then I'll get to my analysis and we'll land the plane on what he's missing. So he begins his analysis. I'm just going to take some quotations from his book. It's a quandary. How much effort should a man put toward a relationship that grows worse with each attempt to repair it? How long should he swim against the current? First off, he never tried to repair it, right? I mean, he tried to repair it by throwing fuel in a fire is going to put out a fire. You just don't understand the nature, so you don't know what you're doing. You think you're trying to repair it, but you're not. And that's, I think one of the reasons why you need to go into therapy, to clear that up. But you can't really do that until you first get to emotions and how they work precisely. We'll get to it. The other thing here is, how long should he swim against the current? Man, that is interesting symbolism, isn't it? Why are you swimming against the current, right? It's that libidinal energy. Why are you swimming against your girlfriend's libidinal energy? What's there to swim against? Get out. Step to the side. I'm not saying to abandon the river. The river is beautiful and there's lots of great things to it, but you're not going to get anything out of the river if you try to swim against it. You need to understand the nature of the river, what it can offer you. Build a dam, create more energy. Go back to my world famous dam analogy. Don't worry, I'm not going to go into it today. But you've been warned. I may go into it next video, and I may draw out the whole diagram and everything. I just like drawing dams. I think they're really cool structures. So interesting symbolism there that, the Jungian in me has to think is somewhat unconscious. But anyways, this is the point of therapy, is to look at how long do you swim against the current? How do you deal with the river? I would say that's a better way of phrasing, not Don't swim against the current. How do you deal with the river? What's the nature of the river? This is the point of therapy. Anyway. Yeah. Anyway, that's some of these memes are kind of dumb. So his analysis continues. My best advice in such situations, be honest about what you're sacrificing and what you're getting in return. Yeah, but this is therapy. This is not your best advice is to be honest. No, that's where therapy begins. How do you be honest? How do you begin to be honest about this situation with Maura? You have not been honest up until this point. This is the beginning point of therapy, not the end. And then he says, men who are unwilling to admit when a relationship fails can get drawn into misery. Yes. Men who are unwilling to admit when a relationship failed. But again, this is therapy. How do you become willing? That's why you go to therapy, is because you've lost your will. Where's my willpower? I want it back. Why do you even go to therapy in the first place? Because I make decisions that I don't want to make, and I can't stop making decisions that I want to stop making. Yeah, I know when men are unwilling. How do you become willing? How do you get your willpower back? How do you engage with your emotions? How do you look at that dark spot and not just say, oh, that's the devil on my shoulder. Here's the angel on my shoulder. You got to go into the devil. You got to go into the dark stuff. Preferably, you have a somewhat decent structure for doing that based on how emotions work, of course. We'll get to it. And then he says, Alonzo overlooked the fact that every attempt to eliminate destructive chaos only magnified it. I guess this is the point I was kind of making before. He never tried to eliminate it, right? He tried to eliminate it, like to the analogy, by throwing, like trying to put out a fire by throwing fuel on the fire. You don't understand the nature of what's going on if you really think that he was trying to eliminate it. He was trying to protect himself. He was trying to protect himself more and more from the pain of connection by just trying to manage her emotions. Right? This is your job. This is exactly the point of therapy. Alonzo overlooked. Get him to look. Get him to be aware. I mean, I keep going back to that example from 2014. When The Interview was going to come out, that movie that was actually a lot better than I thought it was going to be. It was a good movie. About North Korea, Seth Rogen goes to North Korea, whatever. Kim Jong-un threatens Sony, the producer, or like the distributor company, I don't know, and says, you better not release this or we're going to kill you. I forget exactly what the threat is. And so the people at Sony are like, F this, we're not releasing it. I'm not risking my life for this stupid, Seth Rogen, James Franco movie. And then President Obama at the time, his response was, you guys at Sony, you really wussed out. Dude, you're the president of a country whose amendment, the First Amendment of which in the Constitution is protect free speech. That's your job. Their free speech was threatened. That's your job. And you're here, Dr. Smith is saying, yeah, Alonzo overlooked. I know he overlooks. That's why he's in therapy. By the way, I don't even know if breaking up with Maura is the right thing to do. First thing, you need to engage. You need to begin to look at the relationship. And just saying, oh, look at all you're giving up. Look at how exhausting she is. That's not really looking at it. That's looking at the surface. You are at the edge. You're at the brink of the black hole. And you got to go into the singularity, though, because that's where the quantum data is. That's your job, to protect free speech, President Obama. And then, if it sounds unromantic to frame it that way, then good. Yeah, nobody really thinks that sounds unromantic. You just sound like Rollo Tomasi at this point. Yeah, you're like analyzing a relationship, and in a sense, the red pill can be good because it teaches men. I mean, if something at some point needs to teach men, that women have their own best interests in mind in a relationship. And by the way, that's good. They need to have their own best interests, just like you have your own best interests, because you're not her dad and she's not your mom. I know Alonzo's acting like her dad here by, trying to take care of her like that, but right. It's just not the right place for this kind of the bar after work. Okay. Your buddy's talking you through your relationship with Maura. He's going to lay it out in like a cost benefit analysis thing. Not the time or the place for that. So, okay. I said I was going to hint at what's missing, but I think I kind of laid it out. What is missing, of course, is the how. Where's the how, as my mutual Hudden says? We know standards are important. We know when you're dealing with a difficult woman like Maura, we know it's important to have standards and respect yourself. And if this book, if Dr. Smith's book helps you to see standards in a new light and maybe relate with Alonzo and see like, oh yeah, maybe I'm kind of doing the same thing, but that's implicit therapy. That's really not therapy explicated in the book. And that is exactly the problem with CBT. And what CBT misses is its philosophy. It's a stoic approach to a relationship. It's not therapy. It's not therapy until you look at how to develop the standards. And when you don't have those standards, what's the recourse? How do you go about choosing healthy standards in the first place? How do you know your standards right? What's the process? What does that look like? Now, Dr. Smith thinks he does this. He thinks he does this, but in his worldview, especially because of the mind-body dichotomy, he can't. Because all he does when he gets to an emotion or that lower side, in this case, it's Maura, and whatever problem, whatever hook she has in Alonzo, when he gets to that, he says, oh yeah, there's the problem, and it's good to look at that. Look and see what you're doing, and then you need to move beyond it. No, you don't move beyond it. You go into it. We go into it. And until we go into it, we're just standing on the brink of the black hole looking into the singularity. We're still in philosophy. We're not in psychology yet. But what Dr. Smith calls your emotional or lower side, I call what? Your payoff. It's your secondary emotional payoff. It's the state you put yourself in to protect yourself from the pain you feel when you mismanage your emotions. It is not the problem. It is your symptom. It is not the virus. It's the fever. And this is why the mind-body dichotomy is so important, right? Because, yeah, Dr. Smith looks at that, or any other cognitive behavioral therapist looks at that. Which, I don't know. Dr. Smith, he doesn't actually mention cognitive behavioral therapy in this book because I think it's written mostly for a popular audience. But clearly, the premises and how he's explicit, which, by the way, thank you for being explicit about the mind-body dichotomy and how you subscribe to that, because I got in a bunch of arguments with my advisor in one of the grad schools I went to, who was a cognitive behavioral therapist. And it's just like, what philosophy? What are you talking about? This is psychology. This is a completely different field. Yeah, obviously it's completely different. Are they based on, is there relation? Yeah, there's going to be some relation here. Anyway, so I like that he's explicit about that. So that's good. Yeah. But the question isn't, can you look beyond the emotion? It's whether you can look into the emotion. You need to get to that decision, to that feeling, or whatever decision Alonzo needs to make. He needs to get to more clarity. He needs to learn how to engage with the relationship so he can become to a more clear place. And this is, in fact, 100% of therapy. Everything else is simply your morality. And again, the therapy is not the explanation. It's not the explanation of, oh, you have this emotional issue, this devil on your shoulder. You have this because of your family. Because look, you learn to protect yourself when you're in your family. You're reenacting generational trauma, all that. That's not an explanation. Or that's an explanation. Yeah, it is an explanation to some degree. But it's not the therapy. The family issue puts an issue inside you, which isn't your fault, but now it is your responsibility if you're an adult. Right? Going back to the whiplash analogy, if you get rear-ended by a car, rear-ended, you get rear-ended, which may not be your fault. right? If you get whiplash, whose responsibility? It's not your fault, but whose responsibility is it to fix your neck? Right? Even if the guy who rear-ends you is a good guy and says, yeah, my insurance will pay for it, you still got to go do the rehab. And here's a quotation. I'm not going to have, it's from Twitter, from somebody I follow, Connor. I was just going to screenshot it, but I don't know. His tweets are blocked, so maybe he doesn't want me to do that. Well, his name's Connor, and if you want to follow him, I think he's a good follow. Just go through my follow list on Twitter. And he says, if you struggle with self-esteem, it might be something your dad said to you when you were 7. It might be because of you had to protect yourself because your parents' relationship was disintegrating. Yes, that may be why you struggle with self-esteem. That may be why you struggle with having standards. It may also be, this is so quoting Connor, it may also be that you're betraying yourself in 100 subtle ways every single day and subconsciously you know it. It may be that you are perpetuating the issue. Yes, your family gave you an issue. Now you're perpetuating it, and you need to get very clear on how you do that. One way you do that, Alonzo, is you complain about work and get upset when Maura doesn't let you complain because, hey, when she complains, you manage her feelings and now you don't. Okay, that's you. That is one of the many instances. Let's go back to that first date. I would love to talk with Alonzo about that first date. And Alonzo, what were you even feeling? He probably couldn't answer that question. What do you mean, what was I feeling? He's just trying to make sure Maura is happy. And he does this, right? It's unconscious. That's why you need therapy. If it was conscious, then he would change it. This is why it's so important. Why I cannot say this enough. Before you take responsibility for your life, you need to take responsibility for your feelings. I.e., morality without psychology is brutality. And when you don't get this right, if you don't go into the emotion that is the payoff and understand exactly how that's getting there, how that, yes, the devil's on your shoulder. You're right. And Dr. Smith, you understand what its purpose is there for, to protect you. You get that. But how did it get there in the first place? How do you make sure it stays on your shoulder? Why do you absolutely need that devil on your shoulder? Right? And if you don't get exactly why that is, and this is where the repression in cognitive behavioral therapy comes from, is because if you just make it easy, so to speak, by having the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other, and you just got to go with the angel when the client doesn't make that decision and there's no further explanation, well, guess who's the problem? Right? The client. That's the only assumption. Oh, here's a very simple decision and I'm not making it right. There's just something wrong with me. Well, there is something wrong with you, but you need recourse. You need to look at how exactly you mess up. And this is what you talk through in therapy. So how do you talk through the devil on your shoulders? Let's go through an example here. Never good enough. Well, what's the loop? Right? Okay, so the devil, the payoff on Alonzo's shoulder is Maura. So how does he get there? Well, I'm not going to go into a full derivation on this now, but the first step is you have a healthy need. And I don't know exactly your proliferation of healthy needs, what those all entail, but I do know your fundamental psychological need is to have a feeling, identify it, and communicate it. That's your healthy need. But what happens if this is a neurotic loop? Where's the neurosis begin? You repress that healthy need, and then you get to this place where you're isolated. And when you're isolated, you feel shame. And then to compensate for this, who's there? Maura. Maura's there to distract you from this unconscious. What happened here? To distract you from this unconscious pain, right? So this part is unconscious, and then Maura shows up, and you go, oh, look, Maura's the problem. No, Maura's not the problem. She is showing you what your problem is. She's trying to help you out. She's trying to give you a lens into what you're doing, Alonzo. You got to figure that out. And so after Maura, what's the belief? Alonzo said it. He said, that's what men do. So how do you talk through this? Well, there's going to be a lot of different ways to talk through this. Let's go through one example. What would be a good way based on this, right? Because now we know that Maura is not the problem. She is the result of how he is repressing his healthy needs. I mean, there you go. I'm kind of making a bunch of inferences here, but I'm probably right. Let's be honest. So how do you talk through it? Well, first you got to say the facts. What are the facts of the situation? How could Alonzo talk about the facts? He could say, hey, Maura, I manage your emotions. That's my job in this relationship, just so we're clear. Can we put that on the table? Yeah, I talked about this with my psychologist, Dr. Smith, but I need to talk about this with you. And what is the feeling? What is the feeling that Alonzo feels? He feels exhausted. Maybe you could say that. This is my feeling that I have, which, I've worked with a lot of Alonzos in my life. That's going to be difficult enough. And what's the meaning? What does this feeling mean about Alonzo? It means, well, I've turned into my dad. I'm just reenacting this drama from my childhood, this thing that I ran away from, in effect. And I became a general contractor. And he probably put a lot of energy into becoming a general contractor and trying to do well as a healthy defense against his family drama. But until he addresses the family issue, he's going to reenact it in other ways in his own family with Maura. And so what's the responsibility? How is Alonzo responsible for his feeling of exhaustion? Well, he avoids the pain of connection, right? Connection is really painful, and he wants to avoid that. He may not know how to do it, and his way of avoiding that is by managing Maura's emotions. I mean, I could imagine a scenario where before he met Maura, he met an emotionally mature girl who showed up and wanted to connect with him, and he ran away, and he thought it was weird. He thought she was dorky or boring or something. I don't know. But Maura shows up, and he's like, okay, good. I get this. Based on how I relate, how I've been relating with my unconscious up until this point, Maura fits in perfectly good. Again, she's the symptom. And then the fifth step is ask, well, what could I possibly do? What could anyone possibly do? Well, the first thing that I think, or not maybe the first thing, but where this needs to go first before Alonzo's even able to make a decision about what to do with Maura is he needs to apologize. He needs to apologize because he's clearly hurting her. Is she hurting him? Yeah. Thanks, Rollo Tomasi. You're analyzing the situation. That's not therapy. It's not therapy until you realize, how am I the asshole? What do I need to apologize for? And he's manipulating Maura. In those starker terms, he's manipulating Maura. He's saying, I am going to repress who I am so you don't feel uncomfortable emotions because I don't like it when you feel uncomfortable emotions. That makes me uncomfortable. Yeah, so, yep. Dr. Smith teaches you how to be a gatekeeper, I guess, but, at the risk of extending the analogy into, cringe territory, how do you build the gate? You got to construct a fence. Alonzo had no fence. He had no territory. He had no wall. That's why he needs more, right? You said it as much in the case study in the beginning. His life was boring. And for a lot of guys, if the decision is between a disengaged life and no sex and loneliness, and Maura, who's crazy, but at least I'm engaged now. Like, it's not, I'm emotionally engaged, maybe not in the healthiest way, but at least I have something like that in my life, and sex sometimes, then the best decision is to make, is to stay with that girl. And that's going to be like the, when he talks about, like, people say, oh, you're being unromantic. Yeah, the common chick advice here would be what? You got to stay. You need to stay with Maura because you love her. Clearly you love her. And you know what? That's better advice. He needs more information. Alonzo needs more information. And you get enough information crammed in there, and you're going to have to make the better decision, or you're going to overheat. He just needs more information. But of course, this is the point of therapy, is you take that information and you connect it. You connect the dots. You see how it works. So you need less information to get you to overheat to make the decision that you need to make. Alonzo's life was boring. His relationship with his parents probably sucked. How's he worked on that? You got to talk with your parents. You got to learn how to talk with your parents through these issues so you don't repeat them in your relationships. And did he have any friends? I mean, I don't know. I'm sure he has friends. Are they that close? Probably not. He's probably going around not being emotionally intimate with even his friends, because he just manages people's emotions. That's what he does. That's his unconscious MO when he's in any interaction, is, okay, when I go in this interaction, I'm going to manage emotions. I'm going to make sure nobody gets too happy or too upset. Just keep people at this happy medium where I'm comfortable having them. Right? And then you just get pushed around. Yeah, everybody knows a guy at work like this, if a guy on the job site probably acts like Biff from the end of Back to the Future a little bit. Oh, hi, Mr. McFly. Oh, how are you? Yeah, I put another coat of wax on. Oh, yeah, I'm going to get to it. A little bit like that. And then Maura shows up in his life, and everybody on the job site goes, yeah, well, that's what he needs. But you get there by learning how to be honest, right? By doing this work here. By getting very good, I went through one example here, by getting very good at talking through that, looking at your unconscious, right? What leads to these symptoms that you supposedly don't like, yet somehow you need. You get really clear on that, and then you need to take that issue and take your clarity around your issue out into your life and start clearing up the relationship, at least on your side, to whatever extent that's possible. And you don't have to clear it up that long for whatever decision you need to make. Maybe it's stay with Maura. Maybe it's leave. Immaterial. It's all about how do you engage with her. That's way more important. And if you need any help doing this stuff, I do free consultations. joinanimus.com/schedule. Thank you guys. Remember, it's not whether you break up with your girlfriend, it's how deep you go with her.